Hi everyone, and a massive welcome to the first of the Christmas holiday episodes here on InfoSec Live of the CISO Experience, where this week we get to engage with and learn from 5 of our industry's leaders in a live setting with open and honest conversations. For those that are new to the channel, my name's Simon Linstead. I'm the founder of the InfoSec Live community and also your host for this show. And sharing stories and best practice over the last few months has led to 27,000 views and 6,000 hours of our content being viewed on YouTube by our amazing subscribers. So a huge thank you for your engagement. And if you'd like to support the wider InfoSec Live community, or indeed buy me a non-alcoholic festive drink, we do have a few ways you can show your appreciation. Firstly, can't find where to put my cup down. The ability to purchase super stickers in the YouTube chat if you'd like your question bumped up to the top, and 3 tiers of membership allowing you to show your support in any way that you can. And a big thank you to Rebecca Albertan for being our latest premium member. But whether you join or not, being here and engaging with our content is what really matters. And if you're watching this live, please do like and subscribe. We try to make these events as interactive as possible. So make sure you drop any questions in the chat. Mark them with a big Q for my aging eyesight, as it's you, our audience, who make these events so special. Just like to take a moment to thank our amazing show sponsor for helping us grow and provide even more free and engaging content for the community. For us, sponsorship is about partnering with the right organizations, and No Name Security is the only company taking a complete proactive approach to API security. They work with 20% of the Fortune 500, cover the entire API security scope across 3 pillars: posture management, runtime security, and API testing. They're backed by leading venture capital firms, including Lightspeed, Georgian, the Syndicate Group, ForgePoint, Next47, Insight Partners, and CyberStarts, and have raised $220 million, achieving unicorn status only 1 year out of stealth, and that is some achievement. They're privately held, remote first, with headquarters in Silicon Valley and offices in Tel Aviv and Amsterdam. Link to find out more about No Name Security and how they can help your organization is in the comments. And after looking on their site earlier today, if you're looking for work, make sure you check out their career page too, as they are hiring. Okay, get my breath back, then on with the show. Excited today to be joined by another of our industry's leaders. This time it's Arnel Manalo. Arnel, with more than 15 years of IT and cybersecurity experience, has developed and supported comprehensive cybersecurity programs around the globe within multiple organizations across various industries. And his focus is to align cybersecurity with business objectives through a fanatical approach to building relationships with peers, business, and his team to harden the posture and maturity of any business. He's always been a protector and defender. In fact, it's built into him, and from playing defensive positions in sports in his youth to working as an undercover security guard who caught shoplifters and internal employee theft during his college career at a major retailer, he's taken and set his physical guardian instinct as a solid foundation to protect digital assets. When Arnel's not playing a digital night, he spends his time with his family going snowboarding, hiking, fishing, and all-around fun adventures. Now let's bring him on with a sprinkle of festive. I had to bring Christmas into it somewhere this week, Arnel. Thank you very much for joining us.
No, thank you so much. That was awesome. I really enjoyed the intro there, and pleasure to be here. Look forward to contributing to the culture here. So
I'm super excited to have you on. And one of the first things I normally ask people to give us a bit more background, but I want to focus in on the defensive part of sport in your youth. I want you to tell me more about that before we dig into anything else.
Yeah, no, definitely. So playing football when I was younger, I was a linebacker. So I played from those sports, and then I really focused on ice hockey. I played that for about 12 years or so. Played defense position, and through high school, won state one year on my junior year, and so that was a lot of fun. And it's just kind of right. The goalie, protect the goalie, don't let the other team score. That kind of translates over to everyone's secret sauce, as I call it. Every industry, every vertical, they got their secret sauce that they're trying to protect. And so it's really something that I still take to heart and still try to protect, although I'm not wearing pads and jumping in front of pucks that are going.
I was going to say it can get pretty argumentative sometimes in the boardroom, but I take it you don't have to use your physical traits anymore, Arnel.
No, I do not. It's just more of a mental battle now, which I mean, as much as physical was with ice hockey and sports, it still had a very big mental battle to it as well. When you're in the corner with the opponent, kind of punching them, making them feel certain ways. And if you ever watch any hockey games or sports, there's not always the best courtesy talk going on when you're on the ice there.
No, no, there's not. And do you know what? I can relate that to Saturday. Actually, at the weekend, I was fortunate enough to be taken to watch a soccer game. Obviously, soccer players not being real men because they roll around in agony on the floor when they get tapped. But it was the first time I'd had a chance to go and watch a live sporting event for about 4 years. And the team I watched, thanks to 3B Data Security Systems, thank you for the invite, was Norwich City Football Club in the UK. And for the majority of the game, the fans in the stadium were hurling abuse at the manager, asking him to leave, and then wondering why their team were 2-0 down. And you talk about the mental side of the game, being able to deal with that kind of negativity and that sort of pressure must be extremely relatable into any career.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's, even more so, I would say recently in the cyber industry where we all watch the news, we see what's going on. There's a lot more focus on CISOs and their positions on, do they report to the board? Do they report to a CFO? Do they report to legal? There's all kinds of conversation that's happening on there. And it all kind of comes down to that pressure of, who do we report to? How do we fill this? How responsible are we for our actions and what we're doing? And maybe things that slip through or stuff. So it's definitely pressure right now.
So talk to me about the transition then. So at college, you were working in retail, doing physical
Yeah.
security, etc. You left college. Then what happened next? Talk us through it in a bit more detail.
Oh yeah, definitely. So after college, I actually started. So I have dual undergrads, computer system security and network engineering, and so I actually started off as a network engineer. What really piqued my interest there is I grew up where internet was kind of being formed and founded, and all these systems were being connected, and it just really interested me of, hey, I can type this on a computer somewhere and somebody around the world can answer. And so started my roots off as a network engineer. That was kind of really a jack of all trades. It was a smaller company, so I had many responsibilities, not only on the network side, getting things spun up, but system side as well, and even help desk of, my mouse is broken, need to fix this. So we were like the typical IT shop back then of jacks of all trade, to
And
help
how
out. And
how much? Let me just jump in there because how much has that helped you later on in your career?
huge. It has really helped me, because it really sets a perspective on controls we're trying to push, information we're trying to protect, working on the with the end users that intimately. You know how they're going to behave. They're going to find the easiest way to do things. They're just trying to get their jobs done.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a really balancing act for security professionals to secure, harden the environment with also not making things so strict and hard that your users go around your controls anyways, or you basically make it so secure that it doesn't talk to anything and nothing works, right? And
And
so
do you know what I really like about what you said there was you didn't blame the users for any of that. And I think there's too much of that narrative in the industry. In fact, it's that time of year where we get the random posts for password books that you get people posting and mocking, which, well, fair play, might not be the brightest idea, but one could argue that if it was kept in a biometric safe, it would be quite a safe place to keep your passwords.
yeah, definitely. And the whole push on biometrics and pieces, it's actually kind of, I see it going to another level where there's some key initiatives and companies out there are working on items where it's just not biometrics alone. You kind of got to do peer proofing with that biometrics, right? If you look at your iPhone or anything else like that, somebody can get on there. We'll say worst case scenario, bad guy comes up, holds a gun to your head, say, add me to your biometrics, and they could add their face ID or whatever to your biometrics, and now they're in, right? And so it really kind of comes down to, okay, how can we vet that biometrics? And so it definitely, the bad guys are keeping us on our toes. Is all I
They
can
are.
say.
Well, let's focus on that for a moment, the biometric
Yeah.
part, because you look at how physical crime has evolved over the
Mhm.
last few years. Street robberies have gone from, knife under the throat, gun in the back, whatever it might be, to give us your wallet, give us your phone, to now give me access to your Bitcoin account, give me access to your bank accounts. And that's how, I can't talk. I'm looking for my phone, but I'm middle aged, so I misplace it all the time. But everything about me is on that
Mhm.
device
Oh
and
yeah.
it unlocks with one look of my face. It's scary, really, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's huge. And then they're trying to keep up, right? So you had an iPhone, Apple just announced, hey, our iCloud and all of our stuff is now encrypted the backup, and you're like, yay, finally. And then you dive into that. Why was the cause? Why was the delay? And it just right. It comes down to they have a lot of people's data, and there's more hands in the pot for determining when they would be able to pull the trigger on doing that. But to your point, you can pay. Everything's kind of going digital. There are like digital IDs as well. Various states in the U.S. You can actually sign up, register through your state, and they actually load up your state ID onto the mobile app. They have all your information. Even around COVID time, they were able to actually correlate your vaccine status
Yeah.
to your ID and pop all
Got
this
the
stuff
same
up.
here.
And
Yeah.
so for me, I'm seeing here, I'm like, that's kind of cool, but also, pardon my French, how the hell did you get that data and how are you correlating all that stuff, right? Where does it sit? Who's controlling it?
It's even more scary here because the NHS have got all of our data anyway, and then works with various app development companies, developers, all these other people to get these apps in place to share this in what
Mm-hmm.
was groundbreakingly record time. And one does
Oh,
worry about what shortcuts were taken throughout that process.
all right. Oh no, everything was up to speed. No, they did phenomenal, right? There's no, but you bring up a good point, right? It's the age old battle any security professional runs into. Time to market. Let's go. Let's get something in front of here. And um, what I've hoping starts changing a lot that I've been seeing is that I hope end users, both our peers, our clients, our board, consumer base. I hope and I wish that the plan changes instead of being speed to accuracy. I much rather you not be first, but I want you to be right. Because if you're first and you're wrong, what does that do to your reputation? Is that over time you're just going to eventually lose out and people won't believe anything you say. So I hope that there's more weight on accuracy and correct data rather than expediency.
I think a lot of that depends on who they listen to and where they get their advice. And I think the more we see our leadership involved in board level, meetings and decisions, the better.
Mhm.
I think the more companies are focused on technology definitely need to embed that within the process because we've said this before, it becomes sales enablement for these businesses as well.
Oh,
Security becomes the key to accessing some of the most lucrative markets out there.
oh, definitely. 100% agree.
We've got a question here from Splodge. I'll bring them up in reverse order because my mouse is near the bottom one. But the first one is the industry focused on firefighting rather than being proactive? And if so, does this affect the taking in of entry-level personnel? Good question.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I think that really depends on the industry and each organization. It's each organization has their own risk appetite and acceptance of security, and that varies across the board. Whenever you're, interviewing out there, I highly encourage having those discussions on trying to find out what the security appetite is in the industry of that organization. Of is it something where they're just checking the boxes and they just security is a burden and they only do it so that they can check boxes and move on with their lives, and they're okay with getting hacked, breached, and they'll just pay the fines and take the reputation hits? Or is it somewhere where they find out and know that security is integral part of their organization? And so those two kind of buckets really kind of changes it. I would say the second bucket there, where it is embedded, is part of it, then you'll see a lot more proactive in nature. Where um, entry level personnel, it's a hot thing. Cybersecurity shortage jobs. We need more people in the industry. There's kind of like the unicorn by the book approach that has been regurgitated of you got to have security cert, you have to be a sysadmin, a network engineer, help desk person before you step into security. And in a perfect world, I would agree, right? If you had someone who had a good, well-rounded background that could grow up and then latch on security to there. However, we're not fortunate to be able to kind of always play that card. Obviously, you find it, that's great, but if you have someone who's hungry, who has showed initiative, who can jump in, they don't have any prior experience at all, but they're showing, hey, I'm got my security plus, I'm taking these quick 2-month crash courses or anything like that. For an entry level person, I would say very depending on the organization, but they can definitely make it in and get their foot in the door.
I completely agree. And I mean, I was mentioning to you off camera my opinion on the kind of entry level position, and that is there's a lot of mismanagement of expectations from both sides. From employers looking for the unicorn, and also from some people in the industry looking to break in 6 months and land themselves $100,000 job. And I'm not saying that isn't possible, because it is possible, right? It is possible. I've seen people do it, but the norm isn't that, unless you've been some kind of superpower when it comes to networking and managed to relate all your previous accomplishments. It can be a long, hard slog, but I think, going back to what you said about the passion, if someone's got the passion and they're demonstrating that, I think within a year, 2 years, you can become pretty proficient and you can become an asset to an organization. But it's finding those organizations who are prepared to take you on. I mean, the most frustrating thing is every CISO I've spoken to over the last 4 or 5 months has said the same thing about employing on passion, ability, potential. But when it comes to what everyone's seeing in the job market, it isn't the same. So I think whilst it's lovely to hear the leadership say the truth of the situation, somehow the hiring managers, HR, whoever it is, this is breaking down somewhere. Any thoughts on where it's breaking down and what we can do to improve that?
Definitely, it's kind of one of my I'll use the passion word again, where in order for security, at least in my opinion, to be super successful, is you have to establish your peers in your organization. So, that's HR, that's accounting, that's any other on there. And so for bringing onboarding, that's where you really sit down with the HR department, and you say, hey, I'm looking for an entry level person. I want 0 years of experience, 0 to 1 or 2 or whatever. And sometimes we'll say, hey, sorry, we can't do 0 years. We have to at least do 1 year. And so that's where you put clarifying language on that commitment, saying,
Yeah.
preferred, right? Or optional, or any
Again,
other.
if someone's been building labs and doing practical things and
Mhm.
learning over a year, if they
Yep.
can demonstrate that on their resume, I think that is experience, in my opinion.
Oh, definitely 100%. And that's kind of going back
Oh,
on answering your question,
sorry about that.
where it falls apart is there's requirements, right? There's some tape and other things where in order to get somebody in this role at this pay range, at these levels, we have to go to a comp analyst, we have to look out there, and the second you throw CISSP or some other certification on there, well, now it's no longer entry level, now it's more senior level. And so anytime when you're creating those JDs and bringing people in, you have to be very prescriptive and intentional on what you're putting in that JD to match what you're actually looking for. And that's where you really have to bring in the hiring managers in. If you're able to get in the pot to look at the resumes that are coming in and say, hey, I know this one didn't grade exactly what I'm looking for, but they were building labs. They put on here in their cover letter, they said they're doing these things. I want to reach out to those. And it comes down to reaching out to the hiring team or hiring manager. Look at the company that you're applying for, and do some research. Research the company, research the person who's running the team, who's building it. Try to come down. That's that networking piece where if you look at any job, you could have hundreds of thousands of candidates applying for the job. And so what's going to really make you stick out? And that's something where being proactive, being hungry, reaching out, networking, and having that intelligence behind a hopeful submit button. Because if all you're doing is hitting that submit button and you're
Yeah.
walking away, it's almost like playing the lottery,
I think it's about being specific with what you're looking for as a candidate as well, because you see a lot of people saying they want to be in cybersecurity. I mean, cybersecurity means a different thing to so many people.
Oh
The
yeah, definitely.
terminology is the most well known, which is why I use cybersecurity in all my marketing. But in reality, my community is called InfoSec Live because I'm old school and I thought it was information security. But we won't we won't get into that debate. But
No, no.
where I see people winning is where they don't just say they want to be in cyber. They're very specific about the role they want. And from everything you've said about reaching out to hiring managers, etc., how about the more proactive approach, where once you've decided what role it is you want, what about deciding on who you want to work for and starting
Mhm.
to do the research at that point, starting to try and build those relationships before? Again, it's not what
Definitely.
society's used to, because we want everything
Oh,
yesterday. But it
mhm.
is, from everyone I speak to, building up your network, building up those professional connections is invaluable. And I suppose the question coming back to that to you would be, how many people do you hire off of job adverts, and how many do you hire from referrals of people that you know?
It's kind of tough. I guess it really depends on where I was at and where I'm going. So I definitely like to reach out for any open rec I have of reaching out to the team, because I'm building the team together. Everyone's part of the team. So, we have this role open. Does anyone know anybody that can fit into this role? That it's an acquaintance, somebody you worked with prior, somebody that can kind of come in here and just be an asset to the team.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of my first stop. And so that kind of leads on to the networking. Now, if I'm not getting any referrals, I'm not getting anything else like that, that's when I'll reach out to the broad and kind of go through there. Now, that doesn't say I'm also in parallel looking at, just a, a submission coming in that I'm not looking at them at all. I'll look at what's coming in the door at the same time while seeking those referrals. And if something kind of piques my interest that just comes in, then I will definitely reach out. And it really kind of comes down to, there's lots of really talented people out there, really smart people looking to get into the industry. And if maybe this is my hopeful part of me, but like, I give everybody a job and everybody would be well paid,
That'd
and
be nice, wouldn't it?
help us fight all these bad guys out there. We need an army. We need everybody to help out. And you hear speakers get on the stage, and security's everybody's fight. And it's true. It's true to a degree. And so it kind of, one of my things is, if everybody could be a security professional, then everybody would, my job would be easier. But it's one of those things where, what's reality, what's budget,
Yeah.
what's the appetite, and so you got to dive into those.
I think for me the medium to long term concern is the fact that we haven't got enough people coming in at the entry level. But the more immediate concern is the leadership positions, because not everyone who's got a technical background wants to be a leader. And may I suggest that historically, or maybe not historically, maybe people who are in tech aren't naturally people who want to be sticking their heads above parapets and running teams and dealing with people. I mean, I've run my own business and led a team, and I don't want to do it again. If I'd have known what I knew now, I don't think
Yeah.
I'd have ever done it, because that isn't me. So the big problem I see is having enough people at CISO and slightly below to come in
Mhm.
and sort of deal with the demand that we've got at the moment, whilst trying to get small and medium businesses to engage with an industry that's far too expensive for them at the moment.
No, definitely. And that's where I'm a strong believer of growing, where really having a weekly temperature check on your team of, you know, what do you want in your career? Where are you at now? What do you strive for? And that could change over time, right? You can have ones who are, I just want to be super technical. This is my first job. I feel like I need to prove myself from a technical expertise, perspective before I kind of step into looking at a supervisor manager role. And then you'll have other ones who say, hey, I definitely want to step into management roles someday. However, I don't feel like I'm there yet. And so that's where it takes a lot of nurturing and understanding with your team on their goals, their ambitions, their wants, and really, making that bloom into something, and help them out as much as you possibly can. Because like you said, there's so many different jobs where, what's the glory of security, right? Everybody outside thinking of it, they're thinking hoodie over their head, hacker
Yeah.
man 2000 or whatever, kind of going off at it, and
How did you know my handle?
did some OSINT. No, I'm just teasing.
Yeah.
But
It'd be more like Hacker Man 1970 for me.
right. But it really kind of comes down to, nurturing and trying to get those. And there will be opportunities where you have nobody who wants to step into a role, where you might have to go look external to bring that individual in, or be it is, especially with recent events of, am I going to be responsible and get personally sued if my company gets breached or hacked? And it's,
Yeah.
well, as long as you're, kind of the thing, as long as you're not ignorant and you're not, blatantly lying, or things, then you should be fine. But they always use that word should, and that doesn't make everybody comfortable, right? Because you know mistakes happen. You take the data in, you do your damnedest to never have to have those kind of conversations. But I would say, of recent events, it's been something where, I feel some are a little bit hesitant. I've even heard from senior, architects and leaders who could step into, director and CISO levels, that they say, hey, I just saw that thing, and I don't want that
Me. Yeah.
responsibility. I'm gonna wait. And and that there are some that will, take the call and still strive for it.
So what about those who do I mean, Richard Splodge, who's just come in with a comment there, you've kind of nicked my next question, but in a different way. So I'll try and frame it a little bit differently. For someone who has got a technical background and wants to take that next step to becoming a leader, what would your advice be to them on what to focus on to achieve that?
So, I'm taking a second here to think because I've been fortunate to hear very phenomenal speakers, leaders across the industry, and kind of digested a whole bunch of data and opinions on this matter. And kind of what I formulated and gathering all that information, that the biggest thing that kind of comes to my mind are in a leadership C-level position, it's the ability to storytell, the ability to articulate, to
Yeah,
motivate, um, and push the industry and knowing your audience, right? If you're chatting with the CFO, you're going to have to talk numbers, and you're going to have to talk cash flow versus budget impact versus P&L and all those other items. When you're chatting with risk, you got to formulate that into a risk perspective. And so if you're
it's
seeing
also using the right terminology dependent on what industry you're in for risk as well, because
exactly.
20 years in finance, or 25 years, I'm ever so old in financial services, that whilst the risk terminology is the same, it kind of means different things.
Exactly, and that's coming down to clarification on definition of words
Yeah.
and really trying not to use the acronyms. So obviously I threw a few out there, and they still kind of 3-letter TLAs come out every once in a while, but it's 3-letter acronyms, right? TLA. There's another one, but it's something where you have to really build that momentum, and you have to inspire, and you have to be an asset of the business to say, hey, I'm here to serve and protect and move the business forward. And here's a better way we can do this. And always definitely attach, the security impact to that and how that's going to be a benefactor rather than I've sat on past places before where you'll have somebody come in and they'll be sitting in front of the board and they'll be like, we have 2 million critical risks, and it's like this panic thing. And they're going, okay, 2 million critical risks. What's that mean to us? What's the context? What are we supposed to do with this information? And you could be talking to very non-technical people, and they're either going to just ignore you and go on with their days, or you're not going to meet the agenda of that meeting because you've lost the
Do
the
you know
flow.
what another acronym actually, WMT, which was taught to me probably at 16 years old when I did my first sales job, and which means that
Mhm,
you have to explain to people in their terms what it is you're trying to get across. How does it affect them? What does it mean to them? What would happen to them? What would be the financial implication? What would be the reputational implication? All the things that are driving the business leaders. And Art, thank you for tuning in, Art, by the way. And you're going to be a guest on the show next week. I'm super excited. And you've said storytelling is huge, especially when managing up and when communicating risk to the board or informing, persuading your user base. And I completely agree. And if you look at humanity, how have we achieved everything that we've achieved? Well, you could argue that we're about to destroy ourselves if you're a conspiracy theorist or watch the news, but we have pretty much, for some apes that have come out of the jungles or out of the forests or the plains or wherever it was all those years ago, we've achieved masses. And the only reason we've achieved that is by passing on that knowledge. And the way
mhm.
that knowledge has been passed on is around campfires and telling stories. And as Art and you have said, knowledge sharing. And I think my recommendation for anyone looking to get into leadership is to learn the art of storytelling. Learn how to engage with your audience, learn how to actively listen, learn how to have a dialogue rather than a one-sided conversation, learn to understand people's body language. And again, if you're not natural at that, you can even practice being mindful and aware of those things when you're in family situations or talking to
Mhm.
colleagues at work. And it's a learnable skill. It might not ever be your best skill, but it's one I think that anyone can learn enough to become a leader.
Oh, definitely. And that actually made me remember about a time where I was walking through the grocery store, and this gentleman just came up and started talking to me, and he was, you could tell by his body language he wasn't really comfortable and kind of going into it. And so it kind of, for one, it raised my alerts. I'm like, is he being agitated weird because he's going to try to rob me or something, or what? What's going on here? And so eventually, I kind of probably like, how can I, what's going on? And he said, I apologize. I'm actually just trying to get better to communicate and going up to people and talking to them. He said,
Brilliant.
I'm building a business that I have. It's a startup, and one thing that one of my investors and people told me is that I'm technically brilliant. I know exactly what to do and paint these pictures and things, but I almost need a translator on the call with me that'll help, articulate and sell it. And so he actually came in and was practicing with some random people in the grocery store. And so it's everyone practiced differently, but there was a real event of somebody actually.
That's a brave way to practice, and there are speaking groups as well. I think in the US and the UK. I think the National Speakers Association is it in the US. I know there's a similar one in the UK where you can go along to regional and local events and
Mhm.
and practice standing up in front of people. And I think anything like that is a massive benefit to anyone in any career looking to upskill and perhaps
Yeah.
go into leadership. Now, I've got a couple of questions I've written down here, and one of them is quite relevant. So, best books for leadership. Any tips? People love a book tip. So, any books that you've read that have inspired you and made a difference?
So there's one book I recently read that's called The Ideal Team Player. Um, I really, really enjoyed the story there, and it really sets the precedence of there's three kind of attributes, key attributes of looking at team as you're bringing them on, and it brings it down to hungry, humble, and smart. So hungry aspect means in here, like we brought on somebody who's out there doing labs, who's going out there showing that they want growth, that they want to take on more. And the adverse to that is um, somebody who, nope, I don't want anything else to do this. I push these three buttons every single day. I never want to push anything besides my three buttons. They're stagnant, right? Um, the other aspect of that is humble humility. So if you've ever worked with somebody who comes in and pushes people around, they're very there's lots of friction when working with them. It's not really good for the team, right? If you have somebody who comes in that just causes chaos and always, they walk into the room and everyone's just, the body language thing. You're like, oh, you know,
Here they come.
yeah, here they come. Get ready, right? So you want humility in there, right? And then smart. Smart isn't so much technical expertise, but it's what we were talking about that ties into this, the emotional intelligence, the ability to work and understand and have that connection, because at the end of the day, we all work with people. Rather, if you're very deep in the weeds technical and all you're doing is sitting in the corner crunching code or doing firewall rules or whatever you're doing, you're going to interact with people sooner or later, or have some sort of communication by email or anything. And so the ability to work and have understanding is huge. And obviously there's different scales of maturity and completeness each person has amongst those three. And so you got to kind of take those three aspects when you're looking to build a team and weigh what's best fit for the role and position and what you're trying to do. Maybe it's like, okay, well, this person isn't too hungry, but they're smart and humble. So maybe we can get them to the hungry point. So
No,
that was a book that I really enjoyed recently.
thank you. I've dropped the link in the chat if anyone wants to check it out. We're not on commission, by the way, and it is a link to amazon.co.uk. So if in the US you want to go to the US store, my recommendation, I'm looking for it because I've got a copy of it here somewhere, but I've been moving my mum's house this week, and if you could see this studio, it's piled up with boxes. I'm not going to show you, a bit of a mess. But there's a book by a cybersecurity leader called Christian Espinoza called The Smartest Person in the Room, and that focuses on the importance of emotional intelligence in leadership, in particular in cybersecurity. I read it last year. I found it invaluable. And it also, the other thing I got out of that was learning to monotask. So I've got ADHD that was diagnosed a few years ago, which means my brain's a little bit like someone's got a TV remote and they're flicking through channels. So if I've got loads of tabs open on my laptop, for example, I'm going to get distracted while I'm doing a job. So rather than do multiple things at once now, I literally close down everything on my browser, everything else around me, put my phone on silent and do one task until I've finished that, reward myself with a decaf coffee, and then come back and start the other one. And do you know what? Since I've been monotasking, I've achieved so much more. And people say, I don't know where you get the time to do all that. Well, it's because I spend hardly any time now procrastinating or scrolling through feeds or doing anything else because I'm really strict with my own time while I'm trying to get a task done. What works for you when you're trying to get multiple tasks done?
Definitely, and this comes down to I can't recall where exactly I heard it. I'm pretty sure it was multiple different feeds or leadership books, and even just other peers. Is um, having intent with your time of what's your big rocks, what's the top of the fire, and formulating how you're going to accomplish that task this week. And small consistent effort is more impactful than not doing anything for 3 weeks and then burning it all out, right? If you feel like, man, I got these 20 things I need to notch through, and you just start, maybe it's 30 minutes a day that you're just tackling that over a course of a month. That's those 30 minutes a day add up, and you're going to see great progress in a month, and rather than not doing anything for a month, and then taking at it. I mean, it comes down to other things where, hey, I need to read, a book a week is my goal, and people 52 books a year,
Yeah,
and some are able to do it. But then the thing that happens is life happens. You
yeah.
have emergencies, you have to travel, you have to do things, and then you're like, oh crap, I'm not going to finish my book this week because life happened. And so it's still good to have goals. Not saying we shouldn't have goals and strive for things, but I much rather focus on pushing on being consistent.
I think it's so easy to lose sight of what's important though when we've got so much to do. And my tip, what I do before I go to bed, and I think this helps order my mind a little bit. Like when I get up in the morning, the first thing I do is make my bed, tidy the room, and make it all clean. Because for me, I then feel like I've achieved something, which might be silly, but it works for me. But before I go to bed at night, I'll always write down a list of what I want to achieve the next day. And then that becomes my focal point when I'm getting distracted by all the other stuff that happens. I try and draw myself back to that. I just want to say, Alana, thank you for the super chat purchase. I'm going to bring your question up right now. That's amazing of you. What is on your 2023 roadmap that you are most jazzed about? Great question.
So mine would be zero trust. So it's something that we've actually been able to push and get signed off and move towards in this year. And so next year, that's going to increase our security exponentially for a model. There's a whole bunch of other items that kind of tie into this project as well, kind of modernizing things as well. So I would say that for me, that's my big, huge excitement to move forward with next year.
That I mean, it will make for the organisation make a huge difference once that
Oh,
box is ticked, I suppose. So
yeah.
before you get this leads me on really nicely, Alana. Thank you. Seamless. This is to my next question because we get vendors watching this. So you might want to be honest right now about whether you've solved the vendor problem on this and just tell people that you've got a solution because otherwise you might get bombarded with DMs about from zero trust providers. So without asking you to answer the question of have you found a vendor yet, I'll leave you to deal with that in your DMs. What's the best way for vendors to try and engage with CISOs? Because all I hear is that the approaches are wrong, they're spamming their inboxes. What can they do differently to develop these relationships and actually speak to you when you need to be talked to about a solution rather than try and sell you something when you don't need it?
The thing that, at least for me, speaking from my perspective, is being a partner, right? If I never heard from you and then all of a sudden you're blowing me up because it's quarter end, year end, you're trying to get things through, then I know you're just trying to make a sell, right? Which you're a salesperson, that's your job.
Yeah,
I'm not knocking you on it, but I think what's going to really play out in the long term is being a partner to that CISO, to that person, understanding where their mentality has come from, understanding their industry, understanding where their concerns are, and being okay with them saying it's not right now, but now that I was, we've built this trust, we've built this relationship, that the second it does come up, you're going to
yeah.
be my first call.
And
And so I would.
dare I say, if they spent more time educating as well?
Mhm, definitely, and that's uh, there's all sorts of tactics out there of the scare tactics. Oh, this big breach happened, and I'm going to use this. What's the thing? Never let a good tragedy go to waste. And so, they're going to, all marketing's going to go crazy with it, and every single slide deck coming out of the top 5 vendors are going to talk about that thing. And so it's right. Breaches are going to happen. Things are going to get hacked. What can you do to partner with me to better understand where we're going and what we're working on, to be an advocate of my business, to understand we got to make money. We have a certain risk tolerance. We have priorities, and kind of work with us from that angle. And so I would say, for me personally, if somebody was trying to build a relationship rather than just straight up, here's our thing, and we're going to solve this problem for you, and
Yeah.
you know,
How do they know what problem they're going to solve if they don't know what your problem is?
yeah,
I think it's
right.
the assuming that everyone's got the problem that they've got a solution for that irks
Mhm.
a lot of people, and in fact, it can put people's backs up. I think some of the approaches that
Oh,
they have.
definitely.
The biggest successes I hear aren't the ones who sell things in 5 minutes. They're the ones who've had a relationship for a year, 2 years, 3 years, who then have that position of trust, the relationship with the CISO, who, as you said, then when that need does come up, who's going to be on the top of your list to
Mhm.
go back to? And I want to just jump back in the chat to address Gareth's point, because I've had some personal experience for this. So you said you need to take those tips on board about the ADHD. You're waiting for an assessment yourself. Well, my 23-year-old son went to the doctors because he thinks he might have ADHD. I think he might as well. And they referred him to the clinic who deal with it. And he got a letter through, I think it was 2 weeks ago, saying that the waiting list is 3 years. Basically, don't bother writing to us again. So that's the state of the NHS for ADHD. But Gareth, if you reach out to me separately, I've got some links to some organisations that you can approach for free assessments that will help you before the NHS do. Just wanted to mention that one. So, right, next question. One that Richard's put in the chat, or someone did as well, which is about, we Gartner reports are out. All the reports are coming out about threats for next year. It looks to me like it reads like last year's list, but from your or last 10 years list, from your perspective, what are the biggest global threats for cybersecurity over the next 5 years?
Well, if I guess this right, then maybe I should go invest in something.
I'll write it down.
Yeah, I know. No, it's a great question, perspective, because there's been a huge change in kind of how some attacks and things are going on, where over this year and the past year, you read the Verizon data breach incident report, right? Every single year, business email compromise is huge up there on the list of items, but it comes down to how's that happening, what's going on. In the past 2 years, I was actually surprised to see this, where romantic relationships was actually one of the top schemes on there. I'm like, well, maybe people got lonely over the past 2 years of COVID. Maybe that's why it
Funny
popped
that.
up.
Yeah.
But, it kind of comes down to, I'm also giving credit to some of the leaders and people I've worked with, where this individual broke it down brilliantly. Is There's the typical, what we call internet street crime, right? Those are, you know, drive by, scanning your ports, things like that, mass phishing, things that is a user going to click on it. That's always going to be there because it's a numbers game. That's never going to go away, right? I think the next level up is when you kind of get into the organized crime, where it's intentional of, somebody in your industry, or there's been some intelligence done on your community, and they're going to kind of craft a very specific target or attack on your organization because they've selected you to go after. There's ways we can combat those items like that, but I will give credit to an ingenious thing that some recent hackers have done, that has hit up over Twitter, is just straight up offering to pay employees to get into the networks of, I think it was Lapsus. I think they said, hey, we'll give you 20K if you give us access into.
And there's going to
um,
be a lot of desperate people out there as the recession bites next year.
exactly. And so that's one of the things where times get hard. There's been layoffs in the industries and around the world, that somebody's in a tough spot, and if they can make a quick buck, and
You've got to
you
feed your
know
family, Arnel. People will go to any lengths. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
hide under the ruse of
It's much easier doing a faceless crime like cybercrime, where you don't see the end victim, than going out to the store and robbing it with a gun. And I think
exactly.
my concern is the more this becomes accessible, whether it's by, ransomware as a service or phishing as a service or whatever it might be, it's going to become more and more of a problem. My big concern after reading two articles over the weekend is AI and cybersecurity.
Mm,
And I mentioned that mostly in relation to an article I read by Roger Grimes, who was talking about Chat GPT and the fact that he isn't worried about that, but he's worried about his grandchildren. And what
mm,
he's worried about is the fact, everything you talked about, from those spray and pray approaches to see where they can get in. All of this is becoming automated, right?
mhm,
And I
definitely.
think the more AI becomes sophisticated, the more automated all of these. So at the moment, a lot of manual processes become. It's going to make it more widespread and more prevalent. And I think it's the challenge for the industry is to be that step ahead of the malicious actors, and dare I say, the vendors who I moan about on every show might be the ones to help solve this problem.
Definitely, right? Use robots to fight robots, right? You
Absolutely.
know, and
Yeah, I've seen
and
Terminator. It
yeah,
works.
right. Sky now, but it is right. The dynamics changing. Computers getting a lot faster. Not even to, you know, people are talking about quantum computing, where if that gets really big and out there, that all of our modern encryption they're going to be able to crack very quickly. And so, what are we going to do? I mean, anybody who's in our spot, rather, unless you're work for a company that builds encryption and own proprietary systems and things, what's the normal rest of the user world going to do if they, hey, I set the key length really strong, I said it, my cipher suite's really strong, and I've done all this other stuff, but these darn quantum computers are just cracking it in a few hours. So
Yeah.
that comes down to what's the, I've seen several people posing the questions, but I haven't dove into anyone saying how do we actually combat that. And it's definitely an interesting thing that I think is going to come up in a few years. But fortunately, quantum computing isn't like you can just go to
You can't go and buy one yet. No.
and get a desktop computer that's a quantum computer. No, it's very expensive and it's very limited. However, that means, right, governments, organized crimes will be able to kind of purchase that kind of stuff. But we know how technology goes is it gets cheaper and better and more efficient over time. So in the near future, it's going to be an interesting dynamic.
I think some stats I read on the recent article about AI moving forward was that at the moment, I think individuals, real people, can still spot 50% more. So I think that reinforces, even with AI and bots doing the fighting, we're still going to need more people. It's back to that people, process, and technology. It's the people that I think we need to focus on the next few years, whether it be driving more people towards leadership positions or opening the door to more people breaking in. Any final words? We've got about 4 minutes left. Any final thoughts? I know we've got a few people watching. Probably got more people watching and looking to break in than we have leadership. So I'm going to stick on theirs. Any tips for them for differentiating themselves and making themselves stand out to others, especially those who are of slightly older years, like myself, but bring with them a lot of experience? Because ageism is a thing, right? And it
Mhm.
can become a bit of a barrier. How can people overcome that?
I would say for that to kind of break in items is to bridge the gaps in how your experience in past kind of relates to security, because a lot of experience does relate to it, where like an example, when I was in college doing physical security, that was one of the domains for the CISSP, right? And of where I had to set up cameras and I had to inventory track and do all those other things that ties directly into that. And so I would say to kind of rebuild your um, experience to more match that, and then also show that hunger piece where, hey, I'm not just trying to jump on because everyone says cyber's the quickest way to break 100K a year. And actually show passion and drive rather than hey, I looked up this job title that says a senior security architect for this identity and access management platform is making 200K a year. I want that job. Well, yeah, I think a
You
lot
can't.
of people would, right? But that's not like something you step into. And so I
No.
think breaking it down into exactly what you want to do. If you want to kind of go red teaming, you want to be hacking and kind of those things, you're probably going to start leaning towards working for a consulting company, because a lot of companies, unless you're very, very huge, they typically don't have an internal red team, right? And
Yeah.
so you kind of be like, okay, if I'm going down that path, I got to start researching, got to start looking at these hacking vendors and companies and kind of go from there. Maybe it's a large CPA or one of the big four there, or B, I want to get into blue teaming and defense, and you can say, okay, well, what specifically, a generalist or a very specific thing of you want to dive into, and so from there, do research, understand where your heart and your passion is, what really gets you going, and something that you can truly be an expert on. And I say that because if you truly enjoy and you want to dive into it, it's going to be easier for you to push and meet your goals. And so do those items, research, build your resume, show that you're heading this path, that you're serious about this path. And because right, you're going to get asked that question. Hey, I see past 15 years you were, a server, or you were a software engineer. Now you want to step into security. Why the switch?
Yeah.
And you're going to get asked that question every single time. So at least you're going to be able to have a well practiced answer every single time. But really, it kind of comes with that storytelling. Create your story, create your brand, create where you're going, in network and research.
And like you said, Arnel, your story can change, right? Our
Mhm.
goals can change, but unless you have a definitive goal, something that you're aiming for, something specific in the industry, having that generic desire to break into cyber, I don't think is enough. And that's where you see a lot of people fall down. And back to your comment on the earnings, there are easier industries to earn money in than this if you're just doing it for the money. Because I think it's not an industry you can join and then stop learning. You have to have that passion for continuous learning as well, because the pace of change, I mean, for me at 48, it's difficult to keep up with it.
Oh, it's tough, and you're right. They keep us on our toes. From bribing your employees to, huge as a service. I mean, you can look out there right now and talk to others. You can buy ransomware as a service, hacking as a service, denial as a service. And I've heard they have really good customer service too. So it's a true business model out there that they're pushing for. So, um, yeah, it's a pretty interesting time right now.
It is very much so. Well, Arnel, thank you so much for your time today. It's been absolutely amazing, really informative as ever. And everyone who's jumped in the chat, thank you so much for making this so engaging. It really, really does make a difference. And I want to pick up on one in particular. Dwayne mentioned about putting a book together from the best comments in this. Dwayne, I have actually started putting together some best bits for a video can't even say it, compilation. But I do really like the book idea. So if you're a publisher, reach out to me and have a chat. I'll be very interested to find out more. But for everyone else, it's Christmas week, whether you celebrate Christmas or not. I hope you get to spend some time with loved ones and family. If you want to take a break from present wrapping, we have got 4 more shows this week. Tomorrow we're back at 9 a.m. Eastern time, I believe, 2 p.m. over here in the UK with Carl Matson, who's the CISO for our sponsor, No Name Security. So I hope to see you for that one. And in the meantime, Arnel, a very Merry Christmas to you. Everyone who's watched, thank you so much. And I'll play you out with our little festive jingle, followed by our trailer. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.